the Zoning Commission meeting, May 10th, 2023, 6 p.m. in Ascension Parish Courthouse, 607 East Worthy Street, Gonzales, Louisiana. Council's chambers, first floor is now called to order. We have a roll call of members. All members, with the exception of Commissioner Dumas and Kluwat, are present. Item 3, we'll have the minutes for the April 26, 2023 Zoning Commission meeting. Motion by Commissioner Nassner, second by Commissioner Villa. All in favor to approve the minutes? Okay. Any opposition? Okay, that motion passes. Item 4, Chairman's comments. Chairman will be very brief tonight. There are no comments. So, item 5, we're going to have a public hearing to amend the Ascension Parish Development Code zoning tables for recommendation for the approval or denial in the Ascension Parish Council. And item A is zoning review IDPZ 3064.23 for Telecad wireless vertical bridge on behalf of Ray Scheck-Snyder, located on the east side of LA Highway 431, approximately 350 feet north of Harry Savoy Road, to request a conditional use to construct a new telecommunications tower. Ms. Baker, do we have anybody here to speak on the public hearing? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, no, the applicant, you can come forward first. Yes, ma'am, please.
Good evening. Laura Carl on behalf of Vertical Bridge, which would be the company constructing the proposed tower. I'm sure I won't waste your time. All of our materials were submitted with the application. We're requesting a conditional use permit with relief from the strict requirement of the setback requirement of 130% of the height of the tower to nearby residences and commercial buildings. We have, however, submitted a letter from an engineer certifying that in the unlikely event of a wind event, that the tower is designed to collapse and will be built to collapse on itself completely within the confines of the compound itself. So it poses no risk to any of the nearby structures. But I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we will open the public hearing, and is anybody here to speak on this behalf?
No one signed up.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, do we have any comments or questions for the applicant? Commissioner Nassner.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, your name again was?
Laura Carlisle.
Laura Carlisle. Ms. Carlisle, you mentioned that you're requesting an exception to the setback.
Correct.
How much is the delta?
I believe, well, the height of the tower would be 195 feet, so it would be required to be 225 approximately. I believe it's about 70-foot exception on one of the buildings, and let me find that. So there's an existing residence 158 and 4 inches to the southeast, and a commercial building approximately 130 feet to the northwest. So that'd be about a 100-foot exception in one instance. And I wasn't aware that math was going to be part of this, but it would be about a 70-foot exception in the other direction.
And that is a parish setback requirement.
That is a setback required under the telecommunications provision of the ordinance, yes.
Okay. And then I understand that this is going to be a single tower, and when it collapses, it's going to collapse
Correct.
upon itself?
Yes, sir, correct. It's a monopole, and it is designed somewhat like a straw to collapse in on itself, that it will collapse within a 25-foot radius.
Okay, those are my only questions.
Okay. Anybody else?
I do have questions for staff.
Okay, go for it.
So, with regard to the setbacks, this is, I've been on this commission for about a year, maybe a little bit more. This is the second tower that's come to us. The last tower that came to us had the same issue, didn't meet the setbacks. The person that spoke, representing the prior applicant, said, well, none of these towers anywhere in the country actually meet the setback. That's why we developed this design, this engineering design, that it collapses upon itself. So my question really doesn't relate specifically to you, but it's, if that is the case, why do we maintain the setback?
That is a requirement that's in the code. Probably when it was, stated, they probably didn't have the design at that time. And now they've come to with this design, but it's correct. I mean, there's a engineer's statement certifying that this thing collapses upon, upon itself. So it's in there. I mean, that's maybe something we can bring up at a later date and discuss that and have someone here. And I know we can have someone to explain that, but I know that they do collapse upon themselves. If you ever seen them fall before, I mean, very seldom do they, but they will collapse upon themselves. And we also have a certification from an engineer stating that. But this code was probably put in 20 years ago, approximately, and probably at that time, when they fail, they fail. Now they're a little better designed and better engineered.
Yeah, so I'm in understanding and agreement with everything you said. I guess my point is maybe we should be pushing to make a recommendation that this setback ought to be changed if it is the right thing to do. We need to figure that out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Miller?
Yeah, I'm not happy putting a tower in a strike zone, I realize it'd be a very strategic strike to hit that exact house or commercial building there. But we also, as addressed last time, there's a nearby tower. Spencer brought up last time about the dual rules there, that if there was a nearby tower to utilize.
Yeah, the co-location.
Right, to use
Right.
that. Is there a reason why we can't use that secondary tower? I know, I saw the info is it's like a tenth of a mile further out or something like that?
Sure, I'm happy to address that. So there are two issues going on. One, your code has a setback requirement of 750 feet. You can't build within 750
Right.
feet in an existing tower. We're fine on that. But you also have a co-location kind of requirement within a 2-mile radius. There's at least one other tower within that 2-mile radius. However, it will not provide the same coverage as this one. So when these things are designed, the engineers go out and they do a search ring of where, the reason kind of why we're here is this, and this is a coverage map, right? So this is location of the proposed tower, and this is the coverage that exists now. So green and blue are going to be where you've got coverage issues and capacity issues. This will be the coverage and capacity improvement provided by this tower in this area. To get this improvement, you have to be within a certain location, and those existing towers do not provide those capabilities to be able to meet these coverage and capacity needs.
Okay. How much are you lacking if you went on that co-location tower to what you need there?
That would be a question for the engineers, but I know that those towers don't allow T-Mobile and the provider to do what it needs to do.
You have already reached out to those tower owners?
We did not necessarily reach out to those tower owners, but
For
we have
authorization.
engineers that evaluate what would be the capabilities, what they could do with those locations. In fact, T-Mobile is actually already on one of those towers. So it needs this tower the way these things kind of work, they work in tandem, right?
So this is a supplemental to the
Right.
other
Right,
tower
and
already?
to the point earlier, 20 years ago, ideally, you don't put these near anybody, but
Right.
you got to have them near people because people are the reason you need them in the first place.
Okay. So,
And Commissioners, I'd like to clarify one point. It's not a requirement for co-location, it is just a preference
correct.
for it. Just wanted to make that clear.
Okay. Anybody else wishes to speak? Okay, do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and recommend approval with the requested waiver for the setback.
Okay, we have a motion to recommend approval to the council with the requested waiver for the setback. Do we have a second? We have a second by Commissioner Villa. First was by Commissioner Nasser. Is there any opposition to this? Are we all in favor? Okay, that motion passes all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6, new business, the fence ordinance revision discussion. Mr. Jerome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, we have been looking at the fence ordinance again, and I have Mr. Compton here who might want to address some of the issues that we've been having with it. And we may want to come back and make some modifications, but this is just for discussion purposes. Okay.
One question I do have is, and then before you start, Mr. Compton, we had originally went over this in planning, and now we're dealing with this in zoning. Is there a reason why we've changed on that?
It's in the development code.
Well, I just want to make sure.
Thanks. I knew that, but I wanted him to answer.
That was a short answer.
That's why. I just want to make sure on it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's all clarification. Mr. Compton, you have the floor.
Thank you. So with the passing of that revision, we discovered an unintended consequence, which you may or may not have read about. And basically, the intent here is to say that in existing subdivisions that existed prior to the passing of that original ordinance, if there are homes that already have fences in a servitude, and somebody wishes to build a fence in that same servitude, it's not really fair to require that person to lose property to do that. And so the intent of this revision is simply to state that if there's existing fences where the new fence is to be located, we'll exempt you, we'll give you a variance. But the applicant has to acknowledge that that fence is being placed within a drainage servitude, and if any work is ever to be completed, that removal and relocation is at the owner's expense and not at the parish's expense. And so that's the gist of this revision, is basically saying subdivisions before we originally passed it, we will issue a variance so that those fences can remain where they were and in line with the other existing fences.
Great. Okay, commissioners, do we have any comments? What we're going to do first is open a public hearing on this. Do we need to open a public hearing on this?
You're not officially
it's
taking
not
any
an-
action.
Well, I
it's
just
a
want to make
discussion.
sure. So.
It's not a public hearing item. It's
I'm a
just
little gun shy
discussion
after
item.
last week,
Yeah.
so never mind. Then we'll go to commissioners. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak? Commissioner Miller.
What type of problems are we seeing already in these servitudes where the fences are causing, the issue that because I feel like this may be contradictory to what we're trying to do with keeping those servitudes open and clear of clutter. What are we seeing in the servitudes already that we need to address? Is it just, subsurface stuff, or is this, causing a delay in the drainage itself?
So-
We're not running through swales and ditches with fences, obviously, huh?
I think that what I would say is that generally speaking, you're going to have thousands of homes that have already built fences in servitudes through, I'm not going to say no fault, because those plats existed when those fences were built, and those plats have a note that says nothing should be built in the drainage servitude. But there wasn't a mechanism in place for us to either issue a permit or to document when those things were built in the wrong location. And so when we passed this fence permitting requirement, the intent was to catch all new fences and prevent them from being built in drainage servitudes. But what we realized was you're going to have 20 homes in a row that built in the servitude, and this one person whose fence finally rotted and fell down, we're going to require them to now jog their fence around, which, if there is a drainage problem, that one fence not being in the servitude doesn't solve it. It's a much bigger problem. And we just want them to acknowledge, if we ever come in and try or make an effort to improve the drainage in that servitude, they have acknowledged, okay, yes, I'm building a new fence and I may have to move it, it may be torn down, I may have to relocate it, whatever that may be. So I'm not going to argue that we intended to resolve this, but when you look at the sheer number of fences that have been built within drainage servitudes, you're not solving it by making one guy right in the middle put it outside of the servitude.
But they're already non-conforming to begin with. They weren't supposed to build there to begin with, they went ahead and did it anyway. We're trying to rectify the problem that was already illegally created, essentially,
No.
because they were already built in the servitude without permission to get from the get-go. They should have been, as you said, on the plat map there, further in on their own property
Yes,
and not in the servitude.
correct.
But now we're going to have issues that we know we have to go and address drainage. I don't know if you've been reading lately, but it turns out Ascension Parish has drainage issues. If we're going to have to continue to address these issues, I think that allowing it to continue is contradictory to what we're trying to do. We're trying to make the improvements. We're trying to get it back to where maybe that entire 20 homes or whatever down that ditch line or servitude line, they'll all need to replace that fence. If we continue to make them go one at a time and get back in line, then we have less issues going forward. I don't like creating a situation where we're allowing it to, the improper behavior to continue versus let's stop it and fix it now. We have that capability by not going with this and saying, look, you have to get back in line. I realize you got away with it for X amount of years, get back in line to what we should have been doing from the beginning, from day one. That's my concern there, is continuing to allow the wrong, non-conforming, behavior to keep going.
Yes, sir?
Okay. Commissioner Nasser?
Okay, I have a little bit of confusion, and it may be my fault, but I've got black print, blue print, purple print. Some of the blueprint has lines through it, some of the blueprint doesn't, some of the purple has lines through it, some of the purple doesn't. What am I supposed to be considering?
So I don't have that version. I have the version that is without revision. And so on the version that is currently in your code, item C reads, "A fence permit shall be issued by the building department prior to construction of any fence or wall and shall meet the requirements of this section." Right? That's what C says.
Yes.
I have added a 1 underneath that reads, "Permits within subdivisions whose final plats were approved prior to 4/27/2022 may be granted a variance from the requirements of not placing a fence within a drainage servitude if the following stipulations are met. A, there are existing fences already located within the drainage servitude where the new fence is to be located. And B, the applicant acknowledges via signature that any future work that may need to be performed within the drainage servitude could result in the applicant being responsible for the removal of the fence." That's the only change.
I see that, but I don't understand why everything else is so marked up, because it doesn't make any sense to me, because there are some things that are in here in other color that I don't agree with or I have questions about. And I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'm just saying what I have is like Mardi Gras. And I'm not really sure what specifically I'm supposed to be considering, because if I look at E, for instance, on the next page, I have some things I marked up because I think I need clarity on it. But is that not part of the discussion?
Pretty sure the blue's existing. The purple is what Ricky just spoke of. That was he added. The strike-throughs are strike-throughs.
So the purples that were struck through were something that are not currently in the code, but at one point was discussed and now decided we're not going to consider those.
Those were during the batch process
Correct.
that this body decided we weren't going to do those. And so they were in the Microsoft Word document that I edited. And again, the version I have doesn't have markup, so I don't see any of that. So it was just
Okay.
the revision.
All right, well, I have a better understanding. So the funny part about it is, the questions I had are on the blue part, which is in the existing code, not on the purple part, which is what you're proposing.
Sure.
Are we striking all of D?
Are we what?
Striking all of D, the height requirements?
That was already struck.
Okay. Yes, I've got the same thing. I don't, with
Right.
the stroke, I thought purple was everything we were doing.
Okay.
That was what I thought, too.
Any other commissioners have any questions?
What are we doing?
Okay.
This is strictly discussion.
So,
Is it possible to get the copy that you have that's not marked up? And I'm assuming that is the official, what you're looking to accomplish.
I would suggest that what we're going to look at here, this is for discussion only. And with your recommendation, we'd come back at the next meeting with an ordinance change that you can take action on and it would subsequently go to the council, right? So what we're liking to do, and that's why Ricky was here, is just kind of discuss some of the problems that we've seen happen out in the field, and then get your recommendation as to what we should do. If you feel that this is the way we should go with this, because of the problems that we're seeing, we're going to come back to you with the ordinance revision all cleaned up for you,
Okay.
and at the next meeting.
Okay. And that's what, I think that ultimately we are trying to accomplish. I do understand through what we have been experiencing in Prairieville and some of the areas, the necessity for what we have in item C. So what I'm just going to kind of say is I do want to see y'all come back with something a little bit more refined. And, you know, what we're asking for, which I think Commissioner Nasser, he's got some suggested changes as well.
Okay.
Perhaps we can incorporate some of those things in this next suggested. So, Max, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, that was my question. I have some items in E, materials, and in F that I just wanted to point out. And maybe if we are going to be considering a fence requirement, that maybe we could address those. And I'll tell you what they are. They're simple, but I think clarification would help. So materials, 1 says fencing materials shall be compatible with the overall design of the principal building and site landscape. And then it lists acceptable materials. And one of the acceptable materials, for instance, is chain link, which is very common. But chain link is not going to be compatible with the overall design of my principal building, which maybe is a stone house. So, but according to this listing of materials in that opening sentence, am I free to use A through H of materials? Or am I restricted? So if I have a brick house, can I put up a stone fence? Or if I have a brick house, do I have to put up a brick fence? Because
We're
it's
not
compatible.
we're not in the aesthetic business.
Okay,
So this is simply listing materials that you could use and materials you cannot use.
okay. But
So
at
for
the
a
same
little-
time, to be compatible with the overall design of my principal building.
Sure.
Is what it states.
Yeah.
Okay. Another, and then also on the prohibited, the only question I have there, and again, look, I mean, I'm in the engineering industry, so I always think about engineers. It's 1 and 2, fences and walls located within the servitude or otherwise impede or divert the flow of water in drainage ways are prohibited. Well, who determines that it's impeding or diverting the flow of water? And 2, fences and walls located within the required site triangle, who determines the dimensions or the actual geometry of that site triangle? Is that the zoning director? Is that the planning director? Is that the parish engineer? Or is it just left up to somebody decides?
Well, it would be a combination of staff. I'm sure we'd have consultation with an engineering review agency. Staff would look at that. We typically go out to sites, look at that, see what the configuration of the property is.
I would just like something in writing, because as administrations change, so do their philosophies of things.
Okay.
And, you guys may be very stringent on something, the next guy that comes in might not care. I don't know. So I like to have things like that written down, so I know who's making that
And
decision.
then, I mean, speed limits are going to help determine the site triangle as well, obviously. So, I mean, there are some standards, and we can certainly come back to you with that information.
Yeah, I mean, there are standards, but then, like, who's the person that says, this does or this doesn't? That's my question.
And that's all done at the permit level anyway, so. Commissioner Miller?
What, Jerome, you were talking about, what we're seeing in the actual field out there. What are the issues that we are finding in the field and with how much regularity where we need to make this change? Are we every day getting work orders and getting into an area where we're seeing there's a fence in the way, we got to tear it down, we got to make a
Well,
change?
I think what Ricky
And what are
described.
the issues that we're finding?
What Ricky described earlier is really what we're seeing out in the field. So we've got an older subdivision that has a row of houses that's 20 rows long, all right? And we've got fences that encroach into the servitude, and they'll put up the back portion of the fence. So the portion that is parallel to the lot lines, comes to the back, and those portions of the fence are in the servitude. Then we'll have a guy or a person who didn't have a fence there, for years and years and years, and now they want to put one in. And with the new criteria, we're having them comply with the new provisions of the ordinance, and they cannot put it in the servitude. So we've got this stair-stepped approach to the fence line at the back lots. And we're seeing that quite a bit. And so this is where it came out. I mean, they had an article in the paper about it, and some people were, complaining about them not being able to do what their neighbor's doing, that kind of thing. So-
Well, as Mr. Compton just pointed out, we're not in the aesthetic business.
Well, that's true, but it's.
I'm sorry, your fence is not.
No.
What
But
are
it
the
also-
actual drainage orders, work orders that we're seeing where we're having to get in there and these fences? Are we seeing problems? Is the DPW not able to get in there and get work orders completed because fences are a problem?
I can't speak for DPW, but I do know of some instances where we have gone in, we've removed fences, where we had to do the work. So
And that's time consuming
it is time consuming, I would agree.
and reduces the
And it's.
completion percentage of our work
In
orders.
a lot of
which was
cases, it's
addressed.
labor intensive as well, but, but on the other hand, it hasn't prevented us from going in there and actually doing the work.
But the burden is coming.
If there's a
falling on the
public
parish.
drainage servitude, we have the ability to go there and clean it, right?
Anyone else? Okay, do we have a motion for action?
There's no action, just a discussion on it.
Well,
What, we'd ask that you basically give us some direction as to
Okay.
where you want to go, and in the next
Well,
meeting,
what
we'll
we-
come back with that.
well, we definitely would like, pardon me, come back to us next meeting with a cleaned-up version, please.
Okay.
And then, if at all possible, address some of the issues that Commissioner Nasser did mention. And then that way we can properly review this and make a better suggestion to the commission, to the council.
Wait,
you.
excuse me, wait. Do you want it to come back as a public hearing, or do you want to come back and discuss it further, or?
Discuss it further. I think we should discuss it further
Okay.
before we open it up
Okay,
to a public
all right,
hearing.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Item 7, old business. We're going to have the revoting for item for consideration, ordinance ZM-23.04, revisions to the zoning map, Conservation 5, C5 zoning designation.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I might discuss this, as Spencer walked out, so as soon as he's come back, we'll get
We
a
sure
little
will.
bit about it. But we reviewed the tape, and apparently there was never a vote on that particular item.
Okay.
right? The public hearing was open, it was closed, but a vote never occurred for that particular item, so we're just bringing this back to you. We'd like to officially have a vote on it, all right? So, and
Okay.
Mr. Long has just returned, so.
What is this vote?
Yeah.
This is putting it into
Those revisions, that map revision.
just the map?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mr. Long,
I made a motion to approve the table and not the map,
okay,
and that was the issue that we needed to correct.
not a problem, not a problem. So in that sense, do we need to open a public hearing on this again?
No, we did have a public hearing
Okay.
on it already.
Then, in that case, do we have any motions on the floor? Or
Motion to
anything for discussion? Okay, we have a motion to approve recommendation of the revisions to the map by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner Villa. Do we have any opposition? Is everybody approval?
Yes.
That motion passes.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Well, we got staff report first. You're moving a little further.
No report.
I'm not skipping one this time. Thank you so much.
No report.
Motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Thank you so much.